Hey guys, we have a lot to cover this week. We're gonna go over all the basics and all the basic modules that we'll be using. First off, let's take a look at Vcv Rack. Hopefully you've all made your way over and downloaded it. If not, just vcvrack.com. I left the link in last week's video. Just click download here and they have it for all major operating systems. You want to go ahead and make an account. You'll have to sign into that account whenever you open up the program in order to have access to all the different libraries of modules. We'll be focusing on the fundamental modules today and probably most of next week as well. But you would do well to download these Audible Instruments. Those are modeled after the Mutable Instruments Eurorack modules. And the Rampage, the Bufacco here, the Grayscale, don't worry about the E series. But all of these down here are one-to-one replicas of actual Eurorack modules. The Mutable Instruments people, they make all of their code open source, so people just made code versions of their modules. All right, so modular synthesis. What's modular synthesis? Well, modular synthesis is a form of synthesis using modules, hence the modular nature. See, these are modules. The idea is that you can sort of create your own instrument, design your own instrument, build it out. This is actually my current rack setup with a few alterations because I'm planning to make some changes in the future. But the idea is that you can just take it out and put something else in. That you can design it to be what you need at the moment and then alter it later on. You can create things that don't exist in any other hardware. My setup is designed to be very general so that I can use it for a multitude of different things. But this website is modulargrid.net and it's actually set up to help you design your own rack if you're interested in that. The community finds every new module that comes out, they take a picture of it and get all the stats, and it allows you to go ahead and nerd out about things and plan how you're going to go forward. So, Vcv Rack. There are a couple things to set it up. You have your basic modules. Normally, if you boot up a new file, you'll have the MIDI, the VCO, the VCF, the ADSR, the scope, the mixer, and the audio module. So the MIDI CV right here, that's how you get information from outside in here. There are two things here at the top that are the most important, the volt per octave and the gate. If you're using a velocity sensitive MIDI controller, you can also use that as well. Or if you're sending a clock in from somewhere, it has all that. But volt per octave is a standard established by Bob Moog in either probably the late 60s, maybe early 70s. But that's how we communicate notation to the system. Volt per octave, volt because everything inside of a modular system is based upon voltage. This is all just electricity. We're sending electrical signals through these modules and into a speaker. And the speaker wiggles the air. It moves back and forth and it makes shapes and we hear those shapes. The best example of that is this oscillator here. So what an oscillator does is it increases and decreases voltage at regular intervals. It makes a wiggle. So if I plug it into the mixer here and then put it on this oscilloscope here, you'll see that's a sine wave. So it's increasing and decreasing voltage in a really smooth fashion, and I'll show you what that sounds like. See, it's a very smooth sound. Turn that down a little bit. But a triangle wave, see, it's pointier and it sounds pointier. A saw wave even though it's the same volume, it has more upper harmonics. It has more harmonic content to the sound, and so it sounds louder. But with a saw wave, it goes up and then jaggedly comes down. So it's smoothly moving the speaker cone outwards and then yanking it back, and that causes that sort of sharp sound. Square wave sharply goes up and then sharply comes back, and that makes it the sharpest sound. I'm gonna go back to the sine wave for a second because it's bearable to listen to for a long period of time. As you tune it down, you see there's a greater length in between the waves, or wavelength. As you tune it up, the waves get closer together. As we move the speaker more slowly or more quickly, it increases and decreases the pitch. So I'm going to click Initialize here to put it back. So if I send volt per octave into the volt per octave, I can use my keyboard to control the pitch. Now the gate here, that's something different. A gate is a signal that goes from 0 volts to 5 volts and back down. And it's only either at those two positions. So it's a binary signal. It's either off or on. And like a gate, when you open it, something happens. Things can pass through. Whenever it's closed, nothing can pass through. That's the difference between a gate and a trigger. When you pull a trigger, the event takes place and nothing can stop it. We use triggers and gates to tell things to turn off and on in the system. So if I send this gate right here into the CV1, CV stands for control voltage. So everything within the system, again, is controlled by voltages. So now I can tell the note when to happen and when not to happen. Quick note here. This jumble of wires here is what's known as a patch, and what I'm doing when I'm moving these lines around and connecting things together is known as patching, or the creation of a patch. In a modular system, nothing is connected at the beginning, so you build a circuit to create an instrument every time. So every time you experience it, it's something completely different. I like to refer to it as building castles in the sand. Now that's either off or on. What if we wanted to add some sort of nuance to it? Well, then we start to talk about the ADSR here, or the envelope. The envelope of a sound is a description of that sound's volume over time. Every sound has an envelope. So I'm going to send the gate into the envelope here, and send the envelope into the control voltage. So I'm using the gate to trigger the envelope, and then using the envelope here. Why don't I use the VCA, so it's less confusing. Use this VCA, which VCA is a voltage controlled amplifier. Anytime you see VC, it means voltage controlled. So what the thing does is the last letter. Voltage controlled amplifier controls volume. Voltage controlled filter is an EQ. Voltage controlled oscillator oscillates. It's a noise source. Now you see with this right here, we have more control over the volume over time. So I'm going to open up and explain an envelope. So an envelope has 4 sections. Well, envelopes can have more or less, but mostly you'll see 2-stage and 4-stage envelopes, and we're going to describe a 4-stage envelope right now. So there's the attack, and that is the time it takes the sound to get from complete silence to its maximum volume. We have the decay, which is the time it takes to get from its maximum volume to its sustain point. We have the sustain level, which is the level at which it holds whenever you hold down a key. And then we have the release, which is how long it takes it to get from the sustain point to silence after you've let off the key. In a two-stage envelope, you have attack and decay without sustain. A three-stage envelope, less common, but you'll see that in Moog synthesizers sometimes, like the, I think the Mini Moog has attack, sustain, release without a decay stage. And then there are like weird, like I'm planning on getting an 8-stage envelope that does weird stuff. But mainly you'll see this one right here, number 4. Referred to as the ADSR. I gotta let my dog out. She's needy but adorable. Okay, and so we use these 4 stages to really define key aspects of the sound. But the thing is with a system like this, we don't just use them for volume. We use envelopes to do anything you want them to do. The most common setup you'll see with a synthesizer is a 2-envelope synthesizer. Typically, 1 envelope is dedicated to volume and 1 envelope is dedicated to the filter. But let's mess around with the envelope on the volume here. Let's do a fast attack, medium fast decay, and leave everything else the same. So we're getting more of a plucky sound. I think that would sound cool with some delay. So in order to add in a new module, you right-click, and then you can either search for the type of module you want, or you can go by the maker. We'll be focusing on the Vcv Corporation's modules today. And so I'm gonna go over and grab a delay wherever it may be. Probably alphabetical. There's a delay. Let's see how this sounds. Well, it's kind of nice. Sorry for any of the clipping that's happening. It's having some processing issues because I'm screen grabbing while I'm doing all this. So let's talk about, maybe do a little bit more here. So if I have a long attack, it takes longer for the thing to happen. And release, long releases are really cool too. Let's try that with a triangle wave. Completely different. How about a saw wave? Now I want to introduce the idea of using the LFO. So I'm going to go back to the sine wave, and actually I'm going to bypass all of this for right now. And so an LFO is a low frequency oscillator. It does exactly the same thing as an oscillator, except it does it much more slowly. And everything's just control voltage. Everything is voltage in here. So we can use it to do everything we can use anything else to do. But it's cool to use for effects. So I'm going to put this into the frequency modulation slot. And then I'm going to turn up the frequency modulation control voltage. As you can see, it's modulating up and down. So I'm using a sine wave because it's very gentle. And so we have a traditional vibrato now. Has that nice vibrato effect. Now, if we use a square wave instead, has a brighter sound. But what if we used pulse width modulation instead of frequency modulation? So a square wave has this aspect called pulse, which is the width of the square wave, the amount of time that it's at its highest point compared to its lowest point. So I'll show you that real fast. We can modify that with the pulse width knob. And as you could hear, that changes the timbre of the sound. But that's something we can modulate with an LFO. Or instead of with an LFO, we could do it with the same envelope. Maybe a long attack. Even longer. Oh, maybe I should turn up the pulse with CV so it actually works. So you hear that kind of sounds like a chorus of trumpets. It's a common older technique. We'd have a less release. Now with the LFO actually doing something. Using an LFO on the pulse width modulation was a cost-cutting measure in early synthesizers to make a system sound like it had more oscillators than it actually did. And we could use multiple waves from the same oscillator at once. What if I threw a triangle wave in with the square wave? Well, not to the same VCA. We need a mixer, so I could put it over here. Now that we've mastered pulse width modulation, let's move on to filters. Clear the cables here. If you're not getting sound out, check your audio setup over here and try your different outputs. If you're using a audio interface as your main sound receiver and sender for your computer, you might want to check that. You can just click on it and pick which audio device you're using. Probably won't have as many as I do. I have this large digital routing system for my home studio. All right, so volt per octave into volt per octave, gate. So I'm going to bypass the VCA for right now and just use the VCF. So this filter has a low pass filter and a high pass filter built in. So it can either cut off the low frequencies and let the high frequencies pass, or it can cut off the high frequencies and let the low frequencies pass. Using a low pass filter, letting the low frequencies pass is the most common usage. So let's take that square wave and calm it down. Filters are probably my favorite thing. So we can automate that movement of the filter with the ADSR. But we have to allow the frequency CV. And each hardware filter is different. They have different controls, but they all have frequency, resonance, and usually a frequency CV somewhere. So we also have this resonance, and what a resonance does is it adds a boost to the frequency at the point it's cutting off. And makes that classic squelchy sound. This filter also has a drive. Some of them do. It's less common, but that's because a resonance usually cuts off some of the lower frequencies, and a drive actually helps boost that signal back up. If you boost the resonance up all the way, most filters will start to self-oscillate, where they start making sine waves because they're boosting a single frequency so much. So you usually don't want too much resonance, just enough to sound cool. So I'm going to make a classic bass sound now. Put a square wave into the filter. Take the low pass filter out into the VCA. And then send that same envelope to the filter and the VCA. I want a short attack, fairly short decay, a medium sustain, and a medium release, and then tune things down. Not that far. Now to really get that bass sound, we should probably sequence it. So I'm going to add in the sequencer, which a sequencer provides both a gate and a series of different control voltages. So instead of me pressing the key myself, I'll send the gate out. And then I'll send row 1's voltages into the volt per octave. Just sort of a squelchy bass sound. And the sound's really about the opening of the filter and the resonance assisting. All right, so the first assignment is make the worst possible noise with these tools that you can. Play with them, get them up and running, make the worst possible noise you can. What will probably help you in that is this idea called audio rate modulation, which the reason a low frequency oscillator is a low frequency oscillator is because it moves things so slowly that you can't hear it. But if you turn it up fast enough, you actually can hear it. And that's when it gets into audible range, it's called audio rate. I'll demonstrate that. So whenever you use audio rate modulation on something else, you get a combination of the two signals. And this really cool wave pattern is happening now. and then let's sequence that. You get the idea. So I'll include some videos under my lecture every week. Those are optional, but they're really good resources. I've spent a lot of time scouring the internet, finding the best things possible to help me learn, and I'm passing those on to you. Also, today's background music was made again with the Rack, but I'm using the Game Boy, the Nintendo Game Boy, as my main oscillator source. I'm actually using the Rack as an effects processor mainly. I'll do a lecture on that later on. And I'm using this drum machine here as a main sequencer for everything. Again, if you guys have any questions at all, email me about them, but try to do that before Saturday. I usually make these videos on Saturday. Oh, and next week we will go over Ableton and sequencing, these sort of things.